Welcome to Can I Park Here? Brought to you by FindAFashionTruck.com. Nashay and Estrell's mission is to inspire future and existing small business owners. They don't claim to be experts. They're simply trying to figure this all out, just like you.
Welcome to another episode of the Can I Park Here podcast, brought to you by FindAFashionTruck.com. I'm Nashay Snow, and I'm here with
Estrell Riles.
We have a great guest today, but we just want to take this time to say we're back.
Ooh, we know you missed us.
Starting season 2, we're really excited. One thing that I do want to mention is StartAFashionTruck.com has a classified section now. So if you go to StartAFashionTruck.com/classified, we are featuring trucks for sale a week at a time. So if you're interested in getting your truck featured because you're selling it, just send us an email at hello@FindAFashionTruck.com and we'll get back to you. But if you are looking to purchase one, definitely just keep an eye on that classified section to see if we have anything listed. We'll also post things in the private Facebook group if you are a part of it.
Today on our Welcome Back episode, we've chatted with Lorraine Sanders of Spirit 608. She has an awesome podcast, so go check it out. But today, we really wanted to focus on fashion and sustainability, as well as we'll touch on setting up press releases for your business and a lot of other goodies.
Yeah, I have been listening to her podcast since I believe the beginning of the year when I discovered her. And you all know from listening to this, I have an addiction to podcasts, and
That's ridiculous.
It's kind of bad. I'm up to like 30 podcast subscriptions, but I only really listen to like 6 of them. And they're just great. They're great for business owners. Some are very women specific and some are very general and some are just like about living your life with intentions. So she's one of the business ones that caught my eye. And what I really like about her is the sustainability piece. So selling either fashion, be it accessories or clothing with a meaning, like things that are green and, or she even explains like even sometimes it's just buying local. So anywho, she will get more into it, but I kind of like her purpose. And on just a total random side note, because she is a journalist, her press tips are gold, and even Estrella and I can't wait to put them into action. But without further ado,
here we go.
Hello, Lorraine. Thanks for coming on to the Can I Park Here podcast. We're really excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to get to talk to you today. This is awesome.
No, it's really so. I love your podcast, The Spirit of 608. I binge listened to it like at the beginning of this year. I have I think only 9 episodes left. So I went through
my Lord,
40. I know.
Oh God, I want to say thank you, but then I also feel kind of like you had to listen to that much of me talking. That's crazy, but that's awesome. Thank you. Wow.
I have this terrible addiction to podcasts. It's really bad. And since I'm in traffic a lot, it's the perfect time. So I just love them because you learn about all of these different people and their stories. And then there's all these just different tips, be it business tips or life tips. So your podcast was one of the ones that I definitely binge listened to. So it was really good. Good stuff.
Well, thank you. And I'm so right there with you on the binge listening and that is what I listen to all the time nowadays. And I've found that, there's a couple of times when I've realized that I'm really out of it when it comes to current events because I've been listening to so many podcasts and I haven't, and I've been blocking out what's happening with the political situation in our country right now. And so, it's just wild. I'm like, man, I got to take a little bit of a break sometimes from podcasts because I'm starting to, that's my main media source.
Exactly. And I find I'm like, I'm not even listening to the radio. And I have like a good friend in Florida that works for the radio. And she's like, do you even know what's popular right now? And I'm like, I have no clue like what people are listening to. So I told myself like once a week, okay, in the mornings, just listen to some music instead, and some commentary. Yeah.
Well, I totally am becoming one of those people that only listens to music that they listen to. Like, it's like I became growth stunted musically after I was 23. And so I listened to stuff that, came out, and now it's like coming back around and becoming cool again to listen to stuff that was in the late 90s. And I'm like, feel so hip, but I just never moved on. But where I get a really good blast of quick news that I think is awesome, that keeps me kind of like in touch with reality a little bit, is the Skim. Have you ever heard of that?
I do. So that I use that too. Yeah, it like comes into your email daily and it's awesome.
They're so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like a snarky girl that you imagine you'd be talking to at some party in your mid-20s, like giving it the news.
Yeah, Estrelle, you would love it.
What do you mean? So what do you mean it comes into your email?
It's an email.
Okay. So, but is it, what's the difference between just like turning on the news?
Because it's literally like I think this is the last Skim. I just opened it up. It'll have like a quote of the day of something that happened, in the last 24 hours. And then it'll have like the top 5 or 6 stories, but in like 500 words or less. So you could quickly skim what's going on in the world right now. Like it's probably like a 5 to 10 minute read. And then you feel like you're kind of in the know.
Gotcha.
It's good. And another one that I think I sent this one to you too, Estrelle. Refinery 29 has a new app and it's called 8 Things to Know This AM. And literally you just flick through it and it'll give you like all the titles. And if you want to know more, you can actually click the titles to get to the article. So definitely, listeners out there, if you don't have time to watch the news or listening to it on the radio, the Skim or the Refinery 29 app.
Ooh, I learn something new every day.
But Lorraine, so can you give the listeners just kind of a little bit of background about kind of you and kind of, bring us up to date on what you're doing now?
Sure. So my background is in media, and I have been a journalist for over a decade, probably closer to 15 years, if I'm being honest. And I primarily have covered the business of fashion in the last 7-8 years. That's been my focus. And although I didn't start out doing that, I started out doing like general interest stuff. And I actually ended up being sort of focused on fashion because of a blog that I had that was all about independent designers and independent fashion in San Francisco, which is where I lived for 15 years until basically January. So I recently moved over to the East Coast, which I grew up in Virginia. And I moved back to Virginia a couple months ago. And but until recently, my whole life was in the Bay Area. And I had been pursuing a fashion journalism career. And being in the Bay Area, I was really close to a lot of startups and technology. And so I became very interested in the intersection of fashion and technology and have focused on that for the last couple of years, say maybe 5 years, and sort of anything from 3D printed fashion to wearable technology to the way that tech is making e-commerce more efficient and changing business models and all of that good stuff. So I have a real like twin interest in the independent kind of creative entrepreneur side of fashion, and then also the way that tech is making it a different kind of industry than it traditionally has been. So we connected though through my podcast, which is the Spirit of 608 podcast, and it is a show that I do for and about women who are at the intersection of fashion, entrepreneurship, sustainability, and tech. And it's a space I call Fest. It's sort of like my play on STEM. And I started doing that about I started working on a podcast about a year and a half ago, but I only launched it last September. And it's really my way of trying to shift my career into, doing something that I felt like was making a positive impact, through fashion. And I see a lot of fashion doing things that I wouldn't necessarily classify as positive. And I wanted to try to figure out a way to sort of influence things in a direction that I think is, the way that, like, I think fashion has a lot of power to do good in the world. And I'd like to try to be a part of that. So that's kind of what brought me to producing that show. And that's kind of my like overview story.
So what do you mean about being a part of fashion that you don't like? Can you give us an example of something that you're not fond of versus what you believe fashion should be?
Sure. I mean, I could go on about this, probably drive your, listeners. I mean, it would just be way too much. Turn on the fire hose kind of thing. So, I spent many years writing about companies that are producing fashion and apparel, and also writing some consumer-facing stuff that's like about what new styles are coming out and new stores opening and designers and all of that stuff. And it became just, frustrating to me to see how much kind of fanfare there is around things that I think are produced that are, pretty much just meant to be thrown away after 6 months. Disposable fashion. It just struck me as like this huge disconnect in our society right now, when so many of us are really up to date on what's going on with our food, for example. Or there's this huge national debate about, exercise and health with what people are putting in their bodies. But then when it comes to what people are putting on their bodies, nobody thinks about what is this material, who made it, where did it come from, and where's it going to go after it leaves my hands. And so, I have a really strong interest in trying to elevate the people that I think are doing things in a positive way, so that it becomes more mainstream, and that, I don't really ever think that the bulk of consumers are going to like start checking the label on everything that they wear, although that would be great. But I really think people are too busy, and, people don't want to spend more than they have to on clothing. And I think the only way you're going to see really, significant change is that the companies that are doing things in the right way are going to become just the go-to brands for the average consumer. So that's one way. And then like another piece of it I see is that, there are so many examples right now of apparel and fashion, accessories, beauty becoming really interesting entrepreneurial tools for women to build their own businesses. And I see the fact that women can now build a business and generate, whether it's a part-time income or, full on just, support themselves and their family income. That's to be really empowering. And there's a lot of interesting companies out there that are doing things that sort of marry entrepreneurship and style. And, because it's a type of industry that makes money. Like there's a clear product, people love it, people want to buy a lot of it. And so, you look at the Poshmarks and the Stella and Dots, and then you look at like fashion trucks, for example, and there's all these new ways now that I think technology is enabling in one way or another. And they're really, leading to just more opportunity, I think, for women especially, because they're the ones who really understand the market. They understand the customers and what people want in ways that people that have been the traditional business owners, like guys, do not. So that's a whole other side of it. I think you can look at it from many different ways. And I'm sort of in there trying to talk about any of the positive aspects and try to, let people know about what businesses that are kind of in that space are doing.
Now, I think sometimes people, not everyone, but some people have trouble figuring out like how technology and fashion meet. And you've already mentioned like 3D printing, which I guess a good example of that might be like jewelry and just kind of like wearable tech. But even like that term wearable tech, there are some people who are like, what is that? So do you have, or can you think of any good examples of when fashion meets technology and what that looks like, or what type of products those are?
Sure. And I will say that I look at it, I think there's a lot of different ways that fashion and technology collide. And some of it's product based, right? So one of the most popular, I would say, high profile examples would be like Rebecca Minkoff. So her bracelets that will charge your phone, or handbags that have some kind of charging capability in them. There are a lot of, Diane von Furstenberg came out last year and said she was going to do a handbag that had that type of capability. And there's a lot of smaller companies that are creating stuff like that. There's startups like Ringly that has the notification cocktail rings. There are, other companies that have clothing, like textiles that have battery capabilities in them, so that, in theory, you'd be able to sort of charge something by wearing an item. I think that stuff is a little farther out from, being something people are going to find on a rack in a store anytime soon in great numbers. But at least it's in the wings. But then there's things that are sort of, I would say, like less visible, but they're no less impactful. So, for example, there's a company that the founder of it was on the Spirit of 608 podcast early on. The company is called Feats, and they do 3D printed footwear, and they're actually down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I always love finding startups that are like not in the Bay Area or New York, because I think that's another really interesting thing that's happening right now, is these like microclimates of cool entrepreneurial things happening around the country. And but anyway, you take a mobile app, you scan your foot, and you can buy a pair of shoes from them that is custom molded to your foot.
What?
And they will, granted, it's not, they don't have a lot of styles. It's like one ballet flat basically, but they're trying to, show that you can do this, and it fits your foot perfectly. But on top of that, it's made out of all sustainable, materials that are not, they don't, pollute, and it's like better, and it's all recyclable materials, because they're using these polymers that can be put through these 3D printing machines, and you could just, send the shoes back and they'll make another pair of shoes out of them. So not only are you creating less waste because everything's custom, ordered, you're not having this overstock of inventory problem that the fashion industry has had forever, and that leads to tons of waste, and discounted throwaway stuff that ends up in the back of your closet. But they're also creating a product that, it's like that cradle to cradle idea, where when you're done with it, like something else can happen with it. It's not, right now, a lot of fashion, the only thing you can do with it, other than what frequently happens, is it gets sent overseas. But if it doesn't get sent overseas and it's too, messed up for that, they'll like turn it into, insulation or rags, or actually car seat stuffing and foam. So, there's just a lot of room, I think, for, the products that we kind of turn to day in, day out, not like your like evening gown necessarily, but just these average things like your regular shoes you walk around in, to be done in a way that's better for like every single person, or, touch point in that whole cycle.
I'm curious, just as a consumer, or even as a new entrepreneur that is trying to open a new fashion business, how do you go about sourcing sustainable vendors? Like, how do you find them, and what do you want to look for when doing so?
Well, and I think that it's such a challenge for people who want to carry those kinds of products, because one, there's no sort of definitive source. And I think I am by no means like an expert on buying this type of stuff. I've never had a store of my own. So, like I'm coming from this particular kind of perspective as somebody that's covered the industry. But what I see happening is that there's a lot of disagreement about, or different perspectives on, what sustainability even means, or what eco-friendly means, or what positive, conscious consumerism even means. And so this person who opens the fashion truck and wants to bring in so-called sustainable garments, they're going to run into a lot of different definitions of what that is. And, it happens to the designers who create these clothes when they say, well, I want to produce a sustainable clothing line. Well, is, sustainability getting organic cotton, or is it deciding that you're only going to source material from within 100 miles of your house? I mean, it's sort of like, is it going to be something that you never wash, or is it going to be something that you, can, send back to the company when you're done with it. I mean, and so I think that it's really a matter probably of just really being able to know where the item is coming from. I mean, if you as a store owner, retailer, or a buyer are thinking about those things, and you can somehow know with a reasonable amount of, certainty that the thing that you've bought has come through a reasonably responsible supply chain, I mean, you're doing pretty well.
And I think it may be kind of tricky too. Like a lot of the newer fashion truck owners, they struggle to find places to get their clothes, new wholesalers. And when you're just trying to, get the items in your truck right away, it's like, okay, well, where am I going to find this type of eco-friendly, sustainable product and get it like when I need it, like right now?
Yeah. And well, so, I mean, my gut kind of thought about that is that, like, looking at designers and smaller vendors in your own backyard, like local sources, is probably the easiest way to get something that was made responsibly, because it's probably going to be, small production. The person that is designing it's probably going to have a lot of involvement in how it was made. But as somebody that, like, I've had a lot of experience trying to follow independent designers, over the past decade, and it's hard to work with them sometimes. I mean, I love them, but then I've had a lot of retailers say, well, I'd stock more, local independent lines, but the person was around for 8 months and then they decided to go back to grad school and they stopped making their lines. So I couldn't stock my store. And so I decided I was never going to work with them again. And there's a lot of things like that make them less, reliable. And if you're trying to get a small business off the ground, I can see why you would go with, the wholesale channel that's the business that they're in. I think it's tough.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that right now there's so many really cool consumer-facing websites that are out there that are just covering this stuff all the time. And so, like, Magnifico is one site. There's another blog called Sustainably Chic. And a lot of these bloggers are out there just hunting down these types of, of lines. And so I think that they can be a great place to start. And another thing I would say, this is like a practical tip for anyone who's thinking about this. There's a company based out in San Francisco called The Merchant Home. And the founder, Alexandra Sklar, she recently started this thing called the Year of Open. And she basically has sort of challenged creative business owners to come into this. It's like a Slack group. I know everybody everyone has Facebook groups. So this is like a private Slack channel. And you can sign up to be a part of it. And it's all these sort of creative entrepreneurs. A lot of them are design focused more than fashion, but there's all kinds. But they get in there and they start talking about who they're using and like what they're doing in their business. And the first thing Alexandra did when she started this was to share her entire vendor list. And her thought is like,
oh, wow.
What you're selling is about more than the brand and where you're sourcing from. It's about your company and your whole perspective and ethos and how you treat your customer. So, people need to be confident enough to share this information. And if you're doing a good business, then, you'll grow. So she's got that whole kind of, let's just put it all on the table and see if we can make everybody's business better at the same time. So I'd recommend anybody kind of thinking in those directions, maybe check that out as well.
And you touched on this a little bit earlier. So I'm in Maryland, so in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and then Estrella's in Chicago. So of course, I feel like San Francisco in that area has a lot of options. I mean, East Coast, probably New York too. From what you've seen in all the interviews, do you think that kind of the middle area between San Francisco and New York are really starting to kind of get it more and really kind of get on this kind of sustainability kind of bandwagon? Okay, this is something that we really truly need to look at. Have you seen a lot more vendors pop up or just kind of a few scattered here and there?
You mean in terms of retailers working with this type of clothing?
Right.
I think that there are a surprising number of them out there. I have seen some interesting things popping up in places that personally surprised me, like Kansas City, and also, Austin, Texas is a hotbed for this kind of stuff. There are definitely a lot of smaller vendors that kind of only operate in their own local communities. I recently was talking to, and this is far outside of the middle of the U.S. that you're talking about, but I was talking to a woman who's outside of Toronto like 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking, wow, I mean, I know nothing about the media market really outside of the United States, and no wonder I've never heard of this woman, but yet she's doing this pretty cool business there. So I think that there's a lot happening, and it's just that a lot of times smaller businesses aren't necessarily getting the national press coverage and the reach beyond sort of who they know in their local networks, and the people that are getting all the national media coverage. And this is kind of reductionist. I mean, this is a little bit like too simplified, but if you're in the Bay Area, you're in New York, you're in Chicago, you're places where there are these big kind of promotional engines in the way of websites and newspapers and magazines. You're going to know the people in those places better, and it's going to probably be easier for you to get more attention over time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, yes, though, I do think there's more stuff like concentrated in the on the coasts and in those kind of, big metropolitan areas for sure.
Now, you mentioned national coverage, so all the listeners out there, if you head on over to spiritof608.com/resources, there's a PDF like you could sign up for to like I guess, help you with press outreach. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I know journalism is your background. So I'm assuming that reaching out to the press and knowing how to kind of reach other journalists is kind of like your jam. So I was wondering, do you have any tips out there for the fashion truck owners who are trying to get a little bit more exposure?
Yes, I do. And I'm so big on this whole subject area right now because as I started to think more about what I could do to try to help, or just like highlight what all of these cool companies are doing and creative entrepreneurs are doing, it just started to occur to me that a lot of people don't really have a plan around how they're going to reach out to the media, and they're not going to go hire PR because it's really expensive. Mm-hmm. Most PR companies, even if you get a smaller firm, I mean, it's like minimum $2,500, $3,000 a month for a retainer fee just to have the people working for you. And then that's probably, at that amount of money, it's going to take 6 months before you get meaningful coverage. And it's very hard to measure whether or not that coverage is actually helping your business bottom line because you can't track it like you could online ads. So in any case, it's just this whole area that I've gotten fascinated by, and I've always been on the journalism side, and I've decided maybe I can try to tell creative entrepreneurs some of what I experienced from my side. And, my little like tagline for it is make me look, because I'm like, I'm the exact person that you've been trying to get to look. So here's what you should do. So tips. I mean, I guess the biggest thing I can say is I think anybody starting a business should be also kind of thinking about their media and press strategy as they're thinking about their business plan, because they should be closely aligned. Like your media and press strategy should be helping you achieve the same goals that your sort of business plan is helping you achieve, right? Or, at the beginning of a business plan, but say you're a year or so into your business or however far into your business, you probably have milestones and goals and sort of a structure of what you're trying to accomplish in any given year or 6 months or whatever the time period is. And so I think your media strategy needs to be kind of created in order to try to further those things. So instead of like blasting out emails and press releases just off and not really knowing why you're doing it, you need to have a really clear understanding of like, I'm putting this out here because I want to reach this particular audience. And I want to reach this particular audience because maybe they're your only audience, or maybe you've already reached another audience enough that you feel like you're safe there and you're trying to reach a new audience. But, you need to be kind of calculated about that. And so that's kind of the sort of big umbrella piece of it. But then when it comes to the nuts and bolts and just, where do you start? I think it's really common for people to say, okay, great. Yeah, my press strategy is I'm going to launch this new thing, or I have one piece of news. So maybe I'm going to be at an event, or I'm going to open my truck, or I'm going to bring in a new line, or whatever that news driver is. Then they start to reach out to the press just around that news driver. And then they're very frustrated when there's no response. Mm-hmm. And it's because, like most of the time, journalists, it's pretty common, like etiquette wise, among journalists to not respond to anybody. And unless it sounds terrible, but like my editors that like I've worked for years, I will send them an email and they will just like not reply, and they just don't reply unless they actually want to talk to you about something. And it can be very frustrating from the outreach perspective if you're just getting crickets. And so I think you need to be constantly doing something like in very regular increments all year long. And you have to be building the relationships with these people, because once you have the relationships, that's when that's what's going to create them, being willing to pay attention when you do have a really big piece of news. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if you want me to get any more specific about any of those. I don't want to just like ramble incessantly, but.
Well, okay. For like the newbies that are getting into the business, when they go to create their press release, what are the things that they need to focus on to get the attention of the journalists?
Okay. So this may like further confuse people and make them feel really lost, and that's not my intention, but I would say that you should just not even do a press release. Like just don't. Like I think it's just like a huge waste of time. And maybe it's nice. I think it's great if you need to sort of have a public record of something, or if you want to have everything sort of contained in this one document that you can send people, fine. But far too often, I think people go and create this release and they kind of stress over what it's going to say, and then they send it out over PR web or whatever it is, and it just goes off into the ether and like nothing happens. It's much better to, if I was starting a fashion truck right now and I knew I was going to launch it in a couple of months and I wanted to have a press strategy, I think the top things I would do is sit down and go, okay, who is my ideal audience? Who's my ideal customer? What publications locally are targeting that customer? What publications nationally are targeting that customer? And then I would start to look into those publications and create a small media list. I mean, depending on how much time you have, maybe you want to get 5 journalist contacts. Maybe you have time to amass 25 contacts. But whatever your number is based on your time, you start to get their names. You try to find their email addresses. If you can't find their email addresses, you look on LinkedIn, you try to connect with them, you start following their tweets. I mean, it sounds like you're stalking them, but this is like the only way you can get to them. And I can't tell you how many times this has worked for people that have reached out to me. And a lot of times the way that they have gotten to me is that they've really gone out of their way to build a relationship, and they have either suggested somebody to me that might be interesting for coverage, or they have found a story that I've written and they've tweeted it out to people, or they have sent me an email and then followed up, and then maybe followed up again. And I think that's what you really have to do to get the journalists to know that you're doing what you're doing, and then also to have an understanding that you're serious and that your business is something that they should stop and pay attention to. And I know as I'm talking, it makes it sound like journalists are sitting there smugly, like not paying any attention to anything. But really what's happening is that there are so many, like there are these services that get your name and your email, and they start blasting you with press releases. And so I get just so much email every single day, and it's very hard to understand what is real and what is worth looking at and what isn't. And so unless something kind of grabs me, or I know the person's name, or I'm aware of the brand, it's really easy for it to get pushed down in my inbox. And then for me just to be focused on something else and then to not realize that it happened. So that is, you have to sort of understand the sort of day-to-day that a lot of journalists are up against, not really on purpose. It's not about trying to be, you know, a cold, you know, jerk. It's just the sort of like, you know, it's just the culture of the job. And so if you understand that as a retailer, you can kind of do better. You know, it helps you kind of game the system a little bit.
So if you're not, so if let's say I'm a fashion truck owner and I'm not going to do a press release, like let's say if I've developed a relationship with you on Instagram and Twitter, are you then suggesting that they then send you an email with just kind of like the information like, hey, you know, we have an upcoming event, just wanted to let you know? Or do you prefer people to like tweet it out to you or send you direct message? Like, you know, I've always wondered, like, is there kind of an etiquette? Like, is the direct message or a tweet kind of like too pushy? Or is it better just to send like that personal email that may or may not get opened?
Well, that's such a good question because it brings up something that I think is important to talk about, which is that, okay, so depending on what your news is, sometimes journalists, and what type of journalist it is, sometimes journalists don't want anybody else to know about the information that you're bringing to them because they want to be the first to write about it. So if you're opening a store or if you're launching your app or, you know, whatever it is, it's something kind of pretty newsworthy like that, and it's only going to happen one time, and you are able to go to this person and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and it's going to happen in a couple of weeks, and I really would love to give you the exclusive on this, or I would like to see if you wanted to cover it. I haven't offered it to anybody else yet. That can oftentimes really pique a journalist's interest because that's what all media outlets want, is they want stuff that nobody else has so that they seem, you know, more interesting to their audience. So in that case, you would not want to tweet it or make it public. You'd want to go to them and say very clearly, you know, I'd like to offer this to you. And if they don't get back to you, then you would follow up. And then oftentimes you would just say, I'm about to move on to another outlet if you don't want this. But, you know, if it's an event or something else, I think that sending them an email and then following up maybe even twice is a really, really good idea. There's so many times that I will respond like the third time because it just, like, it wasn't the thing that was the highest priority. Like when it was 3 weeks out, but then like the week before, suddenly it's like time to move on it. You know what I mean?
No, that's great advice. And then I was just curious, for just kind of getting back to the spirit of 608 a little bit, kind of what worked for you? Because I feel like your show got popular pretty quick because you just launched in September, but it appears to me that it's pretty popular. And so I was just curious kind of like what tactics worked for you. And then also kind of like what's the future look like for Spirit of 608? Like what type of things are you trying to accomplish and do with the podcast in the next year?
Wow. Okay. So
You weren't
too big. I know that was.
No, I just feel I don't want to like just keep talking in these like 10 to 12 minute chunks that are like. It's just like I feel like it's gonna be like the woman from Charlie Brown, you know, where it's just the teachers like wah 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 wah, you know.
No,
so stop me if it starts to get like monotonous, but. So, okay, what did I do when I started? My process was I pre-recorded. I don't know if y'all did that when you started your show. Did you just come out of the gate with a show and then record another show, or did you do a bunch ahead of time?
I think we did our intro and then episode 1.
Yeah.
Pre-recorded. That's it. Like we jumped in kind of, we really didn't know what we were doing.
It was like, and it was like literally like, let's say if today we were like, we should start a podcast, and then we listened to like Pat Flynn's and watched all his videos, and then a week later we had a podcast. So we had 2 episodes. There was like no planning.
Well, I love Pat Flynn. I love that show. Show's been such a like inspiration to me, and it's funny too because sometimes people will be like, "You listen to what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Smart Passive Income." And if people are not interested in podcasts, they're like, "Okay." What kind of like cheesy like universe have you fallen into? And I'm like, no, it's awesome.
It's like really, really good.
Yeah. So we did that one and Entrepreneur on Fire. So we were like binge listening to all of that stuff. Like, what do we need to do? What do we need to buy?
Yeah. I mean, we went like on Amazon, we had all of our equipment mailed in a week. We had all of our processes documented in Excel and Google. I mean, not Excel, but Google spreadsheets and Google Docs. And yeah, we recorded a couple and then we were like off to the races. So probably the one thing that we were missing was the really like a plan, like a press strategy. We just kind of went there and then we just figured we would market our podcast to our existing audience, you know?
Yeah, well, that's so cool that you came out and you had an audience because when I started the Spirit of 608 podcast, I didn't really have an audience for that name. I had several prior blogs. And like I said earlier, when we, in the conversation, my whole fashion journalism career kind of stems from this one blog that I had that I haven't done anything with in years, but I had an audience that I think some of them, I would say maybe like 40% of that audience kind of like still limped along with me to the Spirit of 608. So I had something, but it wasn't really that cohesive, I guess. But yeah, I like last summer, I kind of stopped what I was doing in terms of reporting for other publications. I mean, I cut back maybe by like 80%, and I just recorded interviews all summer. And I did it specifically because I actually had a podcast before the Spirit of 608 that I did with a friend of mine. And we did it basically like we were at a dinner party one night and we were drinking wine and we were like, let's do a podcast. And we were like, yes. And we had like the best time doing it. And it's, it was awesome. And I wish that I had time to do 2 podcasts because it was just like the best creative outlet and so much fun. But we just kind of put stuff out there, and then we realized, oh, hey, there's a reason that This American Life has, a huge staff, and like it takes an entire radio station to put out, these shows. And we were trying to do like more narrative, story-driven kind of thing, and it just wasn't something that I could personally do on top of working elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And I started to think about, well, how can I do a show that I can put out every week, and then I'll still have time to promote it and still have time to do some other writing. And I came to this realization that it had to be interview based and that it had to be, sort of formatted in a similar way, each time. And, from there I sort of moved into this whole format that I have now, and I just pre-recorded all summer. And so then when I got to September and started rolling the shows out, I had time to actually market them because I wasn't recording and producing them. I wasn't recording and producing them at the pace that I was putting them out. Mm-hmm. And I was still like really trying to figure out what I was doing. I mean, it like took me an incredibly like long amount of time because I was being super inefficient about how I was producing them. Mm-hmm. But now I've gotten better at it, and it's, a lot easier to do. But I would say for anybody who's thinking about starting one, or, the pre-recording thing was really helpful during the launch phase. And it also helped with the iTunes algorithm. So, if you like put out like 2 or 3 episodes a week, then you start landing in the new and noteworthy, and you can get organic traffic that you might not otherwise get.
Yeah. Oh, and then, okay, so people, if you want to do a podcast, keep your expectations like low. Don't try to achieve too much, okay? Because like Nisha and I, we were like, okay, let's do a podcast for Find a Fashion Truck. And then when we do that, let's do our own podcast for just you and I. It was supposed to be like a personal, like lifestyle entertainment type podcast that we were going to do called Nishan Trail. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, because people, I know. I mean, anyone who's thinking about doing it, like it takes work, like even, trying to figure out who you're going to have on, making sure you have the right questions, setting up times, from editing. Like it's like a full-time job.
Yep.
I think sometimes people think like, oh, well, you just kind of get on a call, you press record, and then you just put it out there. And it's like, no, I wish it was that easy.
Well,
Yeah.
and some people do that. But I think when you have a really good listening experience, which I think y'all really do, and listening to your shows, it's clear that you thought about how it sounded from the listener's perspective. You weren't just getting on there and rambling and like, and not editing any of it. And so when you run across a show that it's really enjoyable to listen to, that the person has spent, or the people have spent a lot of time making that happen. It doesn't just happen,
Right.
by accident. So I don't know though. I think maybe you guys could do like a YouTube version of you guys together. I think that would be cool.
I know. That's hilarious.
We'll see.
Yeah. But so what's next for, as we wrap up here, but what's next for Spirit of 608?
Well, I'm continuing to do the show and putting it out once a week. And then at the moment, I'm working on the Spirit of 608 Make Me Look Academy. And I'm still undecided about whether I'm going to call it Academy or not, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff out there called Academy, and I don't know if I like that. But anyway, Make Me Look Academy, and it's online if you want to check it out right now. It's at spirit608.com/Make Me Look Academy. And it's where best entrepreneurs can go to master DIY PR. And essentially, I'm creating a strategic approach to how to do your own PR and media outreach if you're not ready to work with a PR agency or hire a dedicated PR professional. So I want to give people like a download of all the information that I have and try to help them get more attention on their brands, because ultimately that's like what I think is going to make this type of apparel and retailing and it's going to make it more mainstream. And so I want to try to help entrepreneurs do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm sure that we will. This episode is going to give somebody the idea to come up with a sustainable truck with sustainable items in there, where either they're 3D printing in the truck or
That'd be
selling
cool.
wearable tech or something. Because I could just see so many different applications, and I think that truck in most areas would do very well. So yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the shade. So you guys, you mentioned sustainablychic.com. So I went there while you guys were talking. And one of the blog posts is about sustainable recycled yarn. And so this is perfect because I make macrame wall hangings. So this is super great.
Oh yeah, because
So
you
the
can make them more sustainable.
Yeah, so the company that they talked about on the blog is called Reunion Yarn Company, and they have tons of recycled yarn, and they're all so pretty.
Nice.
See, you've inspired Estrelle. She is going green.
Now, the thing though is that I guess because they are recycled fibers, they are a little bit more pricier than just going to like say Michael's or Joanne Fabrics just to, buy like a $5 ball of yarn,
Yep.
So
And that's often the rub. I mean, it's a hard sell a lot of times for people to spend more on something that looks arguably the same.
Right.
And I'm hoping that the more people that are doing this, the more the cost will come down and the more common it'll be. And it'll just be like kind of the difference between buying, something at the grocery store that you think is a subpar product versus something that you just sort of look at it and you're like, well, I know it's a little bit more expensive, but I want to get that, whatever it is, vegetable or,
Right.
you know what I mean? And you just
as long as it's in line with your values, then it'll make
Right, then
sense.
you're willing to spend a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's true. So we just have kind of a couple of wrap up, kind of get to know you questions.
Okay, cool.
Do you have a favorite podcast or blog? And if so, what is it?
Favorite podcast or blog? Well, I mean, I have been enjoying listening to your podcast a great deal. And I also I'm a big fan of The Lively Show. Do you listen to The Lively?
The Lively Show.
Yeah.
She's great. Yeah, I've been listening to her from the beginning.
Yeah, I dig that show a lot. And then another one that I like that's totally on the opposite end of the spectrum in that it's like a bit raunchier and kind of silly, but good information is That's So Retrograde. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So there's these two girls out of LA and they just have this kind of oddball sense of humor. One of them's a stand-up comedian, but they talk about these things that seem a little bit off the wall, but you learn all this really cool stuff. Like I learned about like this, I don't know, they had this whole show. This is going to sound so ridiculous, but it was all about natural deodorant. And I was like completely freaked out about aluminum based deodorant after listening to this. And I switched over to this brand and I was totally afraid I was going to just smell up everything. And it's been great. And I'll just say that I love the show and people should check it out and they're hilarious. So
now, is it that Piper Y that was on the Shark Tank or is it another brand, the deodorant?
No, it's another brand called No Tox Life. And it's just a small little, they sell it like farmers markets in the Los Angeles area. But it's been, I don't know, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I've just added them to my podcast app. Can't wait.
And we'll see. Actually, I should probably say check back with me like in like high July to see.
To test it out.
Yeah, if that deodorant situation, because I did switch. It's like wintertime deodorant switch, but we'll see if it holds. But for now, it's good.
That's hilarious. What do you like to do in your free time to wind down and de-stress from work?
Oh, man. Well, I have two young kids. So I have a 3.5-year-old and a 5.5-year-old. And so a lot of my free time is spent with them and my husband and just hanging out and trying to, entertain everybody and making sure that we all don't lose our minds. So, so that's one thing. And then, but if I have free time of my own and I'm just trying to veg out, I do a lot of yoga, but the less kind of noble thing is that I like really trashy TV. I love it's not lost on me that like The Bachelor is like airing, which is a terrible, horrible show. But like, I don't know what it is. It's like, it's like, it just makes my brain go just completely blank. And I'm just in a tractor beam of like horror and like fascination. And so, yeah.
Hey, you got to have that guilty pleasure. And then Android or iPhone, and what's your favorite app?
I have an iPhone and favorite app. Well, it depends if you want to categorize it in terms of most used app, which will probably be Instagram or Afterlight or something like that. But I've been using Todoist pretty frequently recently.
I love Todoist, yeah,
and it's been really helpful. I like it. It makes me feel satisfied whenever I get to check something off.
Right.
So
I use Post-its.
It's like a sense of accomplishment. I know. I used to do it. So I tried to get Estrella on all these different kind of like apps to get her organized, and she's like, "Nope, I'm sticking with my Post-its," and it's like Post-its everywhere.
That's one of my best friends in the world. She's a Post-it note, just die hard. And you go into her house and the entire wall of like her kitchen is Post-it notes. So, and it works and it totally works. And, so Todoist, though, I love it. The only thing I don't like is that it keeps sending me emails every day telling me that I'm like a novice, and it's like, add more stuff to your list. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I have added what I have to do, and that is it. So
calm down, Todoist. Calm down.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?
I think that I would start boxing.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah, I've always had kind of a dream to go be sort of an old lady boxer. So maybe that'll be in my future. We'll see.
That's different. That's different.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
It
that's
just came
awesome.
out. I don't know. That just came out of my mouth. So yeah, gonna go.
Hey, go with it. I just saw like a video. It's funny. Speaking of boxing, it was like Mike Tyson, I think, versus like Donnie Yen or somebody, which is really good. I'm sorry, that was my Facebook addiction coming out. But anywho, where can we find you? Like, where can the audience find you? Kind of your website and any social media handles that you want them to know about.
Yeah, totally. I am at Spirit of 608 on Instagram and Twitter. The website spirit608.com, and anyone who wants to reach out or shoot me an email can get me at hello@spirit608.com.
Wow, it has been a pleasure. You've dropped a ton of knowledge bombs on the audience today, and I'm sure that they will be following you and listening to your episode. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
you.
so fun chatting with both of you.
Wow, that was an awesome episode. Loved having her on. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, so for our first episode for season 2, we came in hitting it hard with the great information. I mean, come on. That was a great combo.
Yeah, it was pretty
Seriously.
good. I mean, I think like everything she had to say was pretty awesome. And I made a note to myself to ask her, or just at least to bring up, the spirit of 608 is the legend of Billie Jean. Do you remember that movie with Billie Jean?
I do not.
And she's like, enough is enough, because she was like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, those of you,
I don't know where you were going with that.
Okay, so those of us that remember like Billie Jean from, I think, the 80s, it was like God, I can't think of even the name of the movie, but she was like someone who kind of like stood up for her rights. Okay, I've lost
I'm
you
not.
here.
Whatever.
See, this is why I wanted to bring this up with Lorraine, because she named her podcast off of like something that happened in the movie from Billie Jean. Okay. Anywho, so for those of you all who want to learn more about that, just start from the beginning from her podcast, and she'll kind of explain like where Spirit of 608 comes from and how that relates to Billie Jean from the 80s. You are such a hater.
But anyway,
Anywho.
it was great talking to her, and the fact that she's a journalist, it's like she was very well spoken and articulate and professional. It's like for a minute I'm like, wow, why can't I talk this good?
That's her biz.
Right. But so a lot of great information. I actually, from some stuff that she mentioned, I came across a lead where I can get sustainable products for my side business. So it's possible, it's attainable for everybody. If that is an alignment with your values, something that you want to focus on, or bring into your business or your home, go for it. You can't lose.
You can't. It just gives like a different perspective. And if you are thinking about opening a fashion truck and you want a niche, like what better niche is that? Like either, getting, or selling products that are only from vendors within your particular area, or selling products that are made with recyclable fabrics, or selling products that are made with like recyclable fabrics, but also use like some technology. Like people love that. People love products with a purpose. And even if maybe you already have a truck and, you know, you're not trying to change your entire brand, just even having some wearable tech or other special pieces, like sustainable pieces in your truck is just, it's really nice, like to support those local vendors that are trying to make a difference.
Yeah, and when you have products with those buzzwords, eco-friendly, organic, reuse, recycle, people love that stuff. They eat it up.
They do. It makes them feel good because they feel like they are doing something right for the earth.
Correct. Yes.
And I just want to say the name of the movie I was referencing is called
Oh my God.
The Legend of Billie Jean.
Jesus. I thought we were over that. Anyway, let's get this has to be over. Okay. It has to be over.
Anywho, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment in the show notes. If you head on over to startafashiontruck.com, you'll get the link. Everything that Lorraine mentions or that we mentioned in this episode, all the links will be in that episode. You could just go over to startafashiontruck.com and search Spirit of 608 or startafashiontruck.com/spirit of 608. And we hope you enjoyed this show.
And don't forget to go to iTunes, rate us and review us, and follow us on Instagram at FFT_official_ and Twitter FFT_official. Wait, what is it? I just said it. FFT_official_.
We're kind of giddy tonight. It's late, people. But also I'll say share. And even with the reviews, know that even though we didn't get into the new and noteworthy, it's never too late. So we still have those goals and aspirations. And so we want to hit that for season 2. And we can't do that without you guys.
And I really don't want to have to go into season 2 begging for 5 stars and reviews. I mean, that's beneath me for season 2, 2006. Okay. It's so beneath me.
2006.
Oh, well, I mean, there it is. There you have it. So next episode, if I happen to do it.
Okay, we've got to go. We're giddy. I swear, and this is all natural, people. We haven't been drinking. It's just pure, like the time changed yesterday and we're tired.
We really do need to do that podcast for just us, like our regular weird lives.
Nutty. Totally nutty. But anywho, thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. And as always, if you have any ideas for future guests, pass them on. And we will see you the next time.
Thanks for parking here.